We're here today to talk about a new geochemical mapping service formed between an alliance with the technology owner AGI and upstream services company AIPC. This service utilises the water-resistant technology that was originally used to create the iconic Gore-Tex clothing range, but is now being applied to the oil and gas industry. I'm fortunate enough to have with me today Mr. Mark Lawrence, who is a highly regarded exploration and operations geologist, to talk to me about his thoughts on surface geochemistry and specifically the AGI technology. Mark, thanks for coming along. I know you're a busy man. By way of introduction, could you provide me with a brief overview of the principles behind surface geochemistry?
Sure. In very general terms, Scott, hydrocarbons generated from source rocks at depth usually migrate into traps.
Right.
And over geological time, some hydrocarbon seeps through the cap rock of these traps and through buoyancy finds its way into near surface sediments. Surface geochemical techniques usually revolve around taking a small sample of that surface sediment and then analysing that in the laboratory. If enough samples are taken and anomalies are present in these samples, you can get a spatial distribution of these anomalies, and that then will focus your effort on potential zones of hydrocarbon accumulation.
What's the advantages of this over like the other services that might be on the market?
The View 20 service is significantly different to other techniques. First of all, the technology allows detection at much lower concentrations of hydrocarbons. So we're typically talking in the parts per trillion range, whereas other techniques we're looking at parts per million. So it's a much more sensitive technique. In addition to that, the technology looks at hydrocarbon compounds in the C2 to C22 plus range. So a much broader range than in the other comparable techniques. And the other main difference with other techniques is the View 20 service is unaffected by water. So wet surface samples, wet downhole samples, cuttings, cores, even marine samples are all unimpacted by water. So the technique is valid even on wet samples.
Right, so they sounds like some pretty significant advantages. How then would an operating company out there attempting to reduce risk and increase certainty in their exploration apply this View 20 service to their exploration efforts?
Oh, there's a number of applications for this technology, Scott. Okay. I guess it's applied throughout the life cycle of a permit. Right in the very early phases of exploration, you can use the technique to run traverses across your permit and look for areas that are more attractive just to site your regional seismic. If you're later on in the permit life cycle where you've identified prospects and leads, but you have limited amount of budget to apply to detailed seismic surveys, you could then use the technique to high grade those leads which warrant further investigation.
So a focusing exercise really.
Indeed, yeah. The other application is once you've identified some good, strong leads and you want to elevate those to drillable status, you can run the technique over those. And if you've got 3 or 4 leads that look like they're promising from a structural perspective, and now you want to reduce the risk on those further, you can apply the technique to those and high grade your drillable prospects.
Okay, so it seems surface geochemistry is not necessarily new to the oil and gas industry, but how does the AGI and AIPC View 20 service differ from other services that are offered?
With the broad range of compounds that are analysed, you can do that sort of really fine discrimination between prospects. So it's very definitely a tool for that.
Okay, so what about when you're drilling a well?
Yeah, even applications while drilling. You can take cutting samples and apply the technique to that, and that will also give you a good geochemical profile downhole, which allows you to identify compartmentalisation in the appropriate circumstances. There's applications for it downhole as well, and that can be applied to cuttings as well as core.
You've made a discovery. Is there any application in the development world?
Yes, as I said earlier, the technique can be applied at all phases of your life cycle of the permit. So even into field management, where you've been on production for a number of years, the technique can be applied to a field, and that will potentially high-grade locations of additional potential where you haven't swept the reservoir well, or areas that have lower potential where you've effectively cleared or produced the oil from those parts of the field. So even in a field management sense, the technique has application.
That's quite a few applications, as you mentioned, right across the spectrum of exploration and into development. Just on the while drilling side of that expanse of opportunities, you mentioned that you can take cutting samples and analyse those. Surely on a rig there's a whole bunch of contaminants that could cause a problem, and especially with this kind of technology that's reading such minute quantities, wouldn't that be a problem, or is there a way around that?
That's certainly true. There are lots of contaminants on a rig, and we're talking engine oils to greases and other hydrocarbon-based contaminants on a rig. But these are generally complex compounds, and if we sample those potential contaminants and have those analysed in the lab as well, we can identify those potential contaminants from any of the samples that we've taken.
Effectively correct for the contaminants that are on the rig.
Indeed.
Cost is always important for operating companies. Are there any sort of identifiable, tangible cost savings that can be made?
Oh yes, there are indeed. If you run the technique early on in the life cycle of a permit, just by focusing your exploration effort in areas that are more likely to be active petroleum systems, you can reduce the number of line kilometres you need for regional seismic programs. That's savings in the millions of dollars. Likewise, if you're high grading prospects and leads, you would potentially avoid running seismic over leads with less potential than others if you've high graded them with surface geochemical techniques. So again, the savings run into millions of dollars when you look at seismic optimization programs.
So we've finished the service, or AGI and AIPC have finished the service, and the company's got the analysis done. What do the operating companies get in the form of deliverables?
The deliverables from the View 20 service got a comprehensive maps, hydrocarbon profiles, and reports that integrate the full range of data that's available, both geochemical and other subsurface data. This facilitates a much greater understanding of the petroleum system and the commercial implications of that.
So the service offers operators a powerful hydrocarbon mapping tool capable of measuring minute levels of hydrocarbons, unaffected by water, and applicable at all stages of the permit life cycle. If you'd like some more information, go to AIPC's website and request a demo, or talk to one of AIPC's product specialists. Mark, thanks a lot for your time. Appreciate that, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Scott.